Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph.
Welcome to Trial Talk with experienced attorney Michael Joseph. With over 20 years of experience in personal injury, commercial litigation, and criminal defense, Michael is committed to social and economic justice. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're going to talk about what you should do when you get hit by a car. Michael, great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, first question. If I were to get hit by a car, can I sue?
Generally, yes. The New York rules require that cars exercise reasonable care to avoid hitting pedestrians. And generally, you can sue if a car is negligent, they cause you an injury, or they violate the rules of the road. Now, generally, New York, especially New York City, has laws that are very protective of pedestrians. So, for example, if you're in the crosswalk and you have the light or the walk signal in your favor, a turning vehicle has to yield to you. So a lot of cars, for example, what happens is, especially if they're not familiar with New York City's rules, they have a green light. They think they could just go. So they have a green light. They make a right-hand turn or a left-hand turn into a pedestrian. That's one of the most common scenarios you see, especially in Manhattan, where there's a lot of pedestrian traffic. But actually, a lot of these drivers, what they don't realize is that when they're turning, even if they have the red light, the pedestrian who's crossing to the right or to the left of them actually has the right of way. So a turning vehicle always has to yield to a pedestrian crossing in a crosswalk. And actually, under New York law, it's actually a violation where they could actually technically a driver that hits a pedestrian because they didn't exercise due process can actually be arrested and put in jail for up to 15 days. Technically, that doesn't really happen, but there's usually a fine. When a turning vehicle especially hits a pedestrian, they're automatically at fault. And whenever the pedestrian has an injury, they can certainly sue.
Is there a difference if I'm in the crosswalk or not in the crosswalk?
You can always sue if you get hit by a car and the car didn't exercise due care, if they didn't see what there was to see. The difference is you may not necessarily have the right of way if you're not in the crosswalk. We actually, I think in New York just repealed the jaywalking law, but still, if you're not crossing at the crosswalk, you're supposed to exercise reasonable care to make sure you don't step out in front of a car. That being said, cars also have a responsibility to drive at a safe speed under the circumstances, to keep a lookout, to slow down if they see a pedestrian. So the main difference is if you're in a crosswalk, the other vehicle is completely at fault. If you cross outside the crosswalk, you have a responsibility also. And if you didn't necessarily see the car or you didn't look, you might also be partially at fault. So the way that works under New York has what's called a comparative fault law. So what will end up happening is the amount of money you're ultimately entitled to gets reduced by whatever percentage of fault you were. So if you're entitled to a certain number for your injuries, for compensation, and a judge or jury were to say you were 50% at fault, basically your award would be cut in half. So you can always still sue. You're always entitled to some compensation as long as the other vehicle was the car that hit you was at fault. But it becomes a question of how much comparative fault were you? And obviously, if you try the same case in front of 10 different juries, you're going to get 10 different results. So it's really, you kind of come up with a rough estimation of what you think, and then you kind of adjust the settlement figures that way when it comes to talk settlement.
Yeah, I've been driving around cities before and people just sort of pop out between cars and you're just like, oh, there's somebody there, and you don't even, it's you got to have quick reaction time. But yeah, it's not always the fault of the driver.
Well, it's not always 100% at fault.
100%, yeah.
You got to remember, New York City, for example, has a 25 mile per hour speed limit. If you're actually driving 25 miles per hour, even if someone pops out, you can stop the car.
You can stop, yeah.
If you're driving 40 miles per hour, or 50, like a lot of people do on city streets, and then
most people do.
It's a reaction time issue. But the reality is, if you're speeding and someone pops out and you could have stopped if you weren't speeding, you're at fault too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you said if I'm not in the crosswalk, I could still sue, but I might be partially at fault. Is there any sort of situations where the pedestrian, the person walking, is more than 50% at fault?
I mean, if you run out, certainly, or you run into the side of a car, maybe. But despite what people say when they hit people, that's not usually the normal scenario.
Right. Okay. All right. So if I get hit by the car, then who pays my medical bills? Where does that land?
Okay. So if you get hit by a car, what happens is the insurance company for the car that hit you is actually responsible to pay your medical bills. But and they're also responsible actually to pay your lost wages if you're not able to work because of the injuries. That being said, you have to submit an application to that insurance company within 30 days of the accident. And if you don't, they can deny the bills. But even if you blow the 30 days, you can still submit it as long as you have a reasonable excuse. And what we've been able to establish a lot of times is if you're hurt or you're hospitalized, you don't necessarily have the information of the vehicle that hit you. You have to do some research. You have to get the police report. You have to figure out the insurance company. That generally will qualify as a reasonable excuse for the delay in submitting a no-fault application. But you don't want to sit in your hands. If you've been hit by a car and you're a pedestrian, you need to hire an experienced pedestrian accident attorney in New York who can do a lot of this legwork for you and can get the application submitted so that you can seek medical treatment. I mean, there's nothing worse than being injured and unable to get medical treatment because doctors won't see you because there's no insurance. Or especially if the insurance is there, but you just haven't taken the steps to get it set up right.
Right. So tell me this, obviously in New York, lots of city buses. If you get hit by a bus while you're crossing the street, what do I have to do to sue, and what are the time limits there? Obviously that adds a layer of complexity to it.
Buses are illegal or a gauntlet, okay, for the unwary. Because first you have to be able to sue at all against any municipality, public authority, you have to file a statement called a notice of claim within 90 days of the accident. Okay. And New York is very nuanced. Why? Because the bus companies aren't run by the city, they're run by public authorities. And you have to identify which public authority it is to be able to file the notice of claim properly. Mm-hmm. So, for example, certain buses, mostly in Brooklyn, are operated by the New York City Transit Authority. Other buses, especially in Queens or the Bronx, are operated by the MTA bus company. So, if you submit if it's a NYCTA bus and you submit a notice of claim to the MTA bus company, well, you have a little bit of a problem. So, let's talk about what happens if, for example, you didn't file the notice of claim or you filed it late, or you filed it against the wrong entity. Well, then you have to go to court, and it's not a big deal. We have actually done these many times, and we win a lot. We have a very high success rate in these. But what you have to do is you have to file what's called a special petition and seek court leave to file what's called a late notice of claim. And generally, if you could show that the bus company had notice of the accident, of the essential facts of the accident, and there's no real prejudice to them, and you can generally get court approval to file a late notice of claim. And generally, you can show they have notice because there's a police report, and if the police report documents facts that show the bus was at fault, they have notice of the essential facts.
Okay. I know that dealing with like bigger companies, but when you have accidents and things like that can be difficult. Like if you dealing with insurance companies or sometimes transit, whether it's Amazon or anything like that. Do you find that dealing with the bus companies, is it difficult? Is it complicated? Are they usually pretty amicable? How does the process usually go down?
Well, it depends on the company. I could say, for example, New York City Transit Authority is impossible to deal with. They don't return phone calls. They don't pick up the phone. By calling them, it just goes to voicemail. So I think you really have to just have somebody or an experienced bus accident attorney who knows the ropes, who knows what to do, file the notice of claim, just have our investigator walk into their office, get a timestamp so they can't deny anything, and then we proceed against them. So literally, the New York City Transit Authority will stonewall everything. Mm-hmm. So you really need an experienced attorney who knows how to litigate against them, who knows how to push the case forward, and knows how to get you to the finish line.
Yeah, I imagine if you're going in solo, they'll be like, "Oh, this is easy pickings."
Yeah, basically they're going to ignore you. They're not going to do anything to help you. They're going to hope you sit on your hands and let time run out. So if you let the 30 days go by and you don't submit the no-fault application, or you let the 90 days go by and there's no notice of claim, they're thrilled.
All right, let's go ahead and complicate things even further. All right, so if someone is injured in a hit and run accident, what are their rights and how does that process work? I imagine that's got to be a little more complicated as well.
Definitely. If you're injured in a hit and run accident, a lot of people think, "Oh my God, I have to identify the driver." That's the biggest thing. Well, the reality is 90% of the time, you're not going to identify the driver. They're gone. If you don't have a license plate number, forget it. Surveillance generally doesn't have the right angle or the specificity to get an insurance plate, get a license plate. Usually, if you're lucky, maybe you'll catch a glimpse of the car that hit you, but you're not going to have the specificity of the license plate. It's just not going to happen. So what are the real rights someone has when they get hit in a hit and run accident? If you own your own vehicle or somebody in your household owns a vehicle, every policy has a provision for uninsured or unidentified motorists. So you can actually look to your own insurance policy or the policy of the household. Anybody in your household that has a car, that company has coverage for you, and you just have to basically apply for the coverage, submit a no-fault application, submit an application for uninsured motorist benefits, and they have to cover you. Now, let's talk about what happens if you don't have a car in a household. A lot of people in Manhattan just don't have cars. So they live in Bronx, Brooklyn. It's almost less convenient to have a car.
Yeah.
But what happens when you don't have a car and you don't have a car in your household and you get hit in a hit and run accident? Well, New York has something called MVAC, which is Motor Vehicle Accident Indemnity Corps. And basically, it's a public fund that provides the New York State's minimum benefits to people who are involved or victims of a hit and run accident. So what do we have to do to prove or to set up a claim for you for MVAC case? Well, first of all, for MVAC and even hit and runs, you have to be able to show that you contacted the police within 24 hours. So it's very important if you get hit by a car that fled, call 911, get a report. Make sure you have documentation that you contacted 911 within 24 hours, or your claim is going to be denied and you're stuck.
That's not a lot of time.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard rule. Now, if you're seriously injured, someone called 911 for you, that qualifies. Right? If the police came, if an ambulance came, that qualifies, even if you technically didn't call. So yeah, you definitely want to call 911 if you're involved in a hit and run accident or you're the victim of a hit and run accident. Make sure you get a police report. You want to make sure that it's documented that this actually happened. And then the next step is, if you have your own insurance policy or you have a policy in the household, you want to make sure you make the application to the appropriate insurance company for both no-fault benefits and for uninsured motorist benefits. So what are the benefits you're entitled to? Well, if you're in a hit and run, the New York minimum benefits, which is what MVAC provides, are $50,000 for medical bills and lost wages combined, and then up to $25,000 for pain and suffering.
Okay. I feel like a lot of people probably, say, oh, okay, if they get into an accident, it's minor. If they're a little bumped up, banged up a little bit, but they're okay. But then days later, they start to feel pain, or weeks later, or even months later. Can you talk about the importance of taking care of this immediately and not, as you like to say, sitting on your hands?
The longer you wait, the more delay you have, the insurance company's going to turn around and say, oh, you weren't really injured. If you were really injured, you would have went to the doctor. Or they call it, the insurance term for this is gap in treatment. They like to say any gap in treatment, it means you weren't really injured, is not really from this. So by delaying treatment, by not going to doctors, a lot of people think, oh, I'm okay, I'll just shake it off.
Yeah.
It's worse.
I'm tough.
So if you suffer silently, the reality is that you're hurting yourself. Why? You're not getting medical attention. You're not getting it documented that you have this injury, and you're setting yourself up for failure because the insurance company's going to take a hard line and say, no, you weren't injured. A month went by. Something else happened in the meantime. It's not from this.
Yeah. I'll try to pin it on something else.
The insurance company's going to take every opportunity they can to try to deny your coverage, deny you're injured. Basically, they're acting in a self-interested way to avoid having to pay for the damage you're responsible for, or to avoid having to pay for your injuries. I don't care what those commercials say, they are not on your side.
The commercials, yeah. We see a lot of those, especially during football season. Yeah, for sure. So, if anyone's listening right now and they've maybe been injured, or, maybe they find themselves walking a lot in New York and they've always wondered how that would go. At what point should someone contact you?
Immediately. Call us as soon as possible. You definitely want to get an attorney involved. Sooner rather than later, you want to get these benefits set up. You want to make sure you get treated by an appropriate specialist. You want to make sure you get the accident documented. You want to make sure, if you're able to, if you see a car, you get hit by a car and you have a cell phone handy, grab it, try and get the license plate, right? So we can identify the car potentially. If not, you're going to be going to your own insurance or to MVAC.
Are hit and runs pretty common in New York City?
It's becoming more and more common, unfortunately, because what you're seeing a lot of cases where people don't necessarily have the right IDs or have the right insurances. So, there's actually a big problem in New York with people buying plates online, which are really fake, and they know that. So, they don't want to get stopped, so they hit somebody, they just keep going.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of drunk drivers on the road, and they hit somebody, they're drunk, they keep going. So yeah, it's a real problem, and we have a lot of cases. We see a lot of this. So I think if you're in this situation where you've been hit by a car, then you're involved in a hit and run, you really need an attorney who knows what they're doing, because there are time limitations. You don't want to just wait, and all of a sudden find out you're out of time.
We've talked about that before on the show about don't delay, and also don't try to do it yourself.
Correct.
Well, good advice as always. Well, thanks for joining us on Trial Talk with experienced attorney Michael Joseph. To connect with Michael, visit newyorktriallawyers.org. And please like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a review in the comments. Michael, always great to hear from you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.